Hello, second grade. Today, I'm going to read you a book called The Wump World by Bill Peet. And he was very, very, very famous about 50 or 60 years ago. He was almost as famous as Dr. Seuss. He was writing his books around the same time as Dr. Seuss was. And he was famous for being an absolutely beautiful storyteller, and his pictures are also very, very beautiful. Yeah, this was written in 1970. It's a long time ago, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Okay. The Wump World was a small world, very much smaller than our world. There were no great oceans, lofty mountains, giant forests, or broad sandy deserts. The Wump World was mostly grassy meadows and clumps of leafy green trees with a few winding rivers and lakes. But it was perfect for the Wumps, who were the only creatures who lived there. Aren't they the cutest things you've ever seen? They're kind of a cross between a cow and a moose, maybe. Look at the babies. They're so adorable. This guy up here. The Wumps were simple grass eaters, and they spent most of their time grazing on the tall, tender grass that grew in the meadows. In warm weather, they cooled themselves in the crystal clear rivers and lakes, and at night they slept in the shelter of the bumbershoot trees to keep the dew off their backs. Since the Wumps had no enemies, they wandered around just as they pleased with nothing whatever to worry about. However, the Wumps would have been very worried if they had known that someone 1,000,000 miles away was watching their little world. One morning, the Wumps were awakened by a far-off humming sound. It seemed to be coming from somewhere above, and as the humming grew into a heavy roar, the sleepy-eyed Wumps crept through the trees for a peek at the sky. Zooming straight for the earth came a great flock of pot-bellied monsters, with tails and fins, spitting fire and shooting out streaks of black smoke. And I think you can sort of tell that the author is saying, these almost look like monsters. Eyes, nose, mouth, ears. You could almost pretend that that was a monster, couldn't you? Especially if you were a Wump and you had never seen anything like it before. As the monsters swooped down to land, huge legs sprang from their bulging sides, and like gaping mouths, doors flew open, and then ramps shot down to the ground. And down the ramps came a horde of tiny creatures swarming out into the meadows. These were the pollutions from the planet Plutus. They had left their worn-out planet to start a new life in a new world. After such a long journey, the pollutions were overjoyed to find themselves on solid ground once more. Now, the author here is having fun with the word pollution. You guys know what pollution means, right? Pollution means dirty air, dirty water, dirty land, polluted, messy, ruined. So they are called the pollutions, and the planet they have come from is called Plutus. They've wrecked their land. Now they're going to come to the Wump World? Is that fair? They were all prattling with excitement as they followed their leader, the topmost pollution and world chief, across the meadow. At the top of a hill, the chief stopped for a long look at the surrounding countryside. Finally, he said, "Looks good. We'll take it. Plant the flag, Sergeant, and let's get things going." I wonder what things he wants to get going. One shrill trumpet blast brought giant machines thundering out of the yawning spaceships, rolling down runways and out onto the meadow. The timid wumps had been watching warily from the shelter of the trees, and at the sight of the giant machines, they were horrified. They don't want these things coming into their world. They love their world. Wump, wump, they cried, and in a wild-eyed panic they went humpety-clumping off through the trees to go diving headlong into the nearest cave. It's good they have a place they can go, but I don't think they want to live under the ground, do you? Then down they tumbled, head over heels through a twisting tunnel to end up huddled together in dark caverns while the earth-shaking machines rumbled and roared high above. Once they got started, the monstrous machines moved at a furious pace, gobbling up trees and grinding them to bits. Again, that looks like a mouth, doesn't it? And that looks like a mouth. And that looks like a mouth. More giant machines flattened the ground, followed by great scoopers and scrapers and diggers and gigantic cranes. Soon, the entire wump world was overrun. It didn't take them long, did it? The busy little pollutions kept their mighty machines going full blast day and night without let up in a frenzy to improve their wonderful world, their wonderful new world. Do you think that's an improvement? This is what it used to look like. Is that an improvement? Suddenly, great cities sprang up. Huge factory buildings with towering smokestacks, high-rise apartment buildings, and tall office buildings. And above them all loomed the 100-story skyscraper. Along with the buildings came a tangle of streets and freeways with on-ramps and off-ramps, overpasses and underpasses, jammed with trucks and buses and cars of all sizes rushing pell-mell in every direction. It was one great turmoil of noise and confusion, and there was still more to come. I can't believe they could build that so quickly. Meanwhile, the poor wumps remained underground, wandering aimlessly through the caverns, feeding on the fuzzy green moss growing on the ledges and the mushrooms clustered in the crannies, and sipping the sweet water from pools fed by underground springs. But they were very unhappy. For all they knew, they might have to spend the rest of their days down here. The wumps didn't dare venture up to the surface, not even for a peek. They were much too frightened by the endless rumblings and roarings and loud screechings coming from above, and it was getting noisier every day. At least they do have food and water down there. But it's not much fun to be living underground, is it? Ooh, boy, that's what you call pollution. There was more and more noise and more of everything. More buildings with more smokestacks puffing more and more smoke. More freeways with more traffic shooting out, more and more clouds of exhaust, more trash piles with more and more waste gushing into the rivers and lakes. We don't want that pouring into our rivers and lakes, do we? We don't want our skies looking like that. Pretty soon, the cities were so clouded by the factory smoke and the fumes from the freeways, the pollutions could barely breathe. They went sneezing and wheezing about the streets, grouching and grumbling and blaming each other for the awful mess they were in. I wonder why they didn't learn their lesson if they already did this to their own world. Why did they come to this planet and just do the same thing over again? Plus, do you notice that they're all smoking? That's not very good either, is it? One day, an angry crowd gathered outside the World Tower building, demanding to see the World Chief. When the chief appeared on his balcony, all the pollutions began shouting at once. We can't breathe the air. We can't drink the water. We can't stand the noise. We've had enough. Achoo! Sneezed the chief. I know just how you feel. And something will be done at once. I promise. With no time to lose, the chief called for a meeting with his 3 top outer spacemen. Gentlemen, he said, this world of ours has gone sour. We've got to get out of here quick. But first we must find a new world, a better one. That's your job, men. So get going. Instead of cleaning up the wump world, they're just going to go find another place to mess up. I cannot believe that. Now that is where we're going to leave it for today, on a cliffhanger. So if you want to find out the second half of the wump world, come back again next week. Until then, don't pollute. We don't want to be like the pollutions, do we?